I told myself my husband needed humility. I told myself a man like Tomas could not handle sudden power. 3 years of marriage had taught me how to press the soft places and call it honesty. 40 messages sounded excessive only after someone else heard the first one. The first one was enough to change how everyone looked at me. My name is Bella Koval. I was 34, and I made powerful people sound clean for a living. I was a communications director at a luxury recruitment agency, which meant I knew how to turn weakness into polish and polish into money. I told myself my husband needed the same skill, only at home, where nobody paid me for saving him from himself. That was how I said it then. Saving him. The rooftop above my office smelled like burnt coffee and hot metal from the elevator vents. Thomas had waited in the lobby with a paper cup in one hand and an almond pastry in the other. Because once, years earlier, I had said I liked them when I was nervous before a client pitch. He remembered small things like that. My husband always remembered small things. 2 things were on the bench between us: his coffee, my phone. Then his navy tie appeared from his coat pocket like a flag he was not brave enough to raise yet. He told me Northbridge Legal Solutions had moved him to the final interview stage. CEO. He said it in a careful voice like the word might break if he spoke too fast. I smiled because the rooftop had glass doors and people inside could see me. I had a face for good news. I used it every day. He said the final interview was in 2 weeks. He said Mara Chen would be there. He said it was not guaranteed, of course, but it was real. I counted 3 things before I answered: the tie, the coffee, the small hope in his face. I told myself someone had to keep him steady. I said he should not build castles over one interview. I said legal companies liked serious people, not men who started floating because one room finally noticed them. Thomas looked at me for a long second. Not angry. That would have been easier. He asked what had changed between us. He said I used to be the first person who believed he could do more. What I heard was that he wanted applause. What he meant was that my hand had moved from his back to his throat. I told him nothing had changed. I told him I was being practical. I told him ambition was useful only when it fit the person wearing it. My husband nodded, but he did not touch the pastry. That night, Vera texted that ambitious husbands became unbearable if you clapped too early. I read it twice. Then I started typing the version where Thomas was ridiculous, not brave. Vera chose the wine bar because the lighting made everyone look expensive. That was her phrase. She liked places where even the water came in bottles with narrow labels and the staff pretended not to hear private things. I sat with Vera, Evan, Alina, and Daniel at a round table near the back. Thomas was not there yet. He had said he was finishing a practice call with someone from Northbridge. My husband had started saying Northbridge the way careful people say a church name. I told myself I was not mocking him. I was warming the room before he arrived. Vera asked why I looked amused. Evan leaned back with that smooth half-smile he used when he wanted a story but not responsibility for it. Alina was checking the menu. Daniel, Thomas's brother, was folding his napkin into a square, then unfolding it again. I said Tomas had a final interview for a CEO role. I let the word CEO hang there. 1 second, 2, 3. Vera made a soft, impressed sound, and it irritated me before I understood why. Evan asked if Tomas had CEO energy. That phrase did something to me. CEO energy. I heard the room giving him a shape I had not approved. I said my husband had spent 20 minutes that morning deciding whether his socks looked too junior. I said he had been practicing a handshake with the bathroom door like the door was a board member. I said Northbridge might enjoy a man who treated a tie like a rescue plan. Vera laughed first. She always laughed first when I made a clean cut. It made her feel close to the blade. Evan smiled and said executive presence could be coached, but only if the raw material cooperated. He looked at me when he said it, not at Daniel. Alina gave one small laugh and then looked down at her plate. Daniel did not laugh. He had gone still in that accountant way, like he had opened a file in his head. I told myself they understood the joke because they understood me. I was sharp. I was honest. People liked that until they were the subject. When Thomas arrived, the air changed. Not fully, just enough. He kissed my cheek, sat beside me, and asked what everyone had been talking about. Vera said I had told them about the interview. She said it brightly, but the brightness had a lid on it. Thomas glanced at me. I smiled like I had done him a favor. Daniel asked him how he felt about the final stage. Thomas answered in a measured way. He said he was prepared, not comfortable. He said the company was growing fast and needed structure. He said he had spent years building operational plans for people who took public credit for them. That last part was not aimed at me, but I heard it land near me. Evan asked whether he was ready to be the face of a legal company. Thomas said the role was not about being a face. It was about judgment, process, and people trusting the person in charge. I hated how calm he sounded. There was nothing ridiculous in it. The room listened, so I took the room back. I said Tomas should remember that a CEO still had to choose his own socks. I said Northbridge could not send someone home with a manual for confidence. I kept my tone light, which was how women like me avoided being called cruel by people who enjoyed cruelty when it came wrapped properly. Vera laughed again, but not as fast. Alina reached for her water. Daniel looked at Tomas. My husband smiled with his mouth and not his eyes. He asked the waiter for sparkling water. That should have been the end of it. It was not. At home, the apartment hallway smelled like rain from his coat. He hung it carefully. He always hung things carefully when he was upset. He asked what happened at the wine bar before he arrived. Specific. Factual. He asked why I had told people he practiced CEO posture in the bathroom. I told him he was making it ugly. I said I had been building buzz for him. That was the kind of phrase I used at work, and I used it at home because it let me hide inside my own job. He said I made him sound like my assistant applying for permission to stand up. There it was. A sentence too clear to bend. I told myself clarity was not the same as truth. I said he was sensitive because the opportunity was too big. I said some people panic when they get close to something they asked for. He asked whether that was what I thought he was doing. What he meant was simple. He wanted to know if I saw him as a man trying. What I heard was a demand to kneel before his new future. I said I did not have time to manage his mood. I said if he wanted a cheerleader, he should have married someone with less going on. He went quiet. My husband was good at quiet. That was one of his flaws. He thought silence was dignity, but silence also leaves people alone with their worst version of the story. He took his phone from the counter when it buzzed. I saw Daniel's name before he turned the screen away. One message, one glance. Nothing said. The next morning, Alina called me on my way to work. She said the jokes had sounded meaner than usual. She said Thomas had looked smaller by the end of dinner, and she did not think that was funny. I told her she was young and still believed every serious thing needed a soft voice. I said marriage had corners she had never touched. She did not argue. That was new. At the office, I wrote a leadership profile for a man who could not answer a simple question without 3 assistants. I made him sound visionary. I made him sound grounded. I made him sound like the kind of man people should follow into difficult rooms. Then I looked at Thomas's name on my phone and did not call him. By lunch, Vera had sent 3 messages about how men changed when companies gave them titles. Evan sent one about how confidence looked strange on people who discovered it late. I answered Evan first. That mattered later. That evening, Daniel did not join our usual group chat joke about restaurant photos. Alina sent a heart to Vera's picture but not to mine. Thomas came home with a folder from Northbridge and placed it on his side of the table. I told myself distance was not danger. Distance was useful. It gave people time to remember who had always been the stronger one. But my husband did not ask me to read the folder. He made tea. 1 cup for himself. None for me. The birthday dinner was for Evan, which meant the room already belonged to performance. He had booked a private room with dark green walls and low lamps over the table. Everyone looked polished and faintly guilty under that light. I wore a black dress that made Vera say I looked untouchable. I liked that word. Untouchable was better than loved because nobody could take it back in public. Tomas came in wearing the navy tie. I saw it before I saw his face. That irritated me too. A strip of silk should not have been able to challenge me from across a restaurant. My husband greeted Evan, Daniel, Alina, and the others with that quiet steadiness he used when he wanted to be liked but not studied. People asked about Northbridge. One person asked what kind of legal services the company handled. Another asked whether a CEO role would mean speaking at industry events. Thomas answered well. Not flashy. Not timid. Well, I counted 4 people leaning toward him before dessert menus arrived. 4. I told myself this was what happened when a room became unbalanced. Someone had to correct it. So when Evan asked if Thomas was nervous, I smiled and said, nervous was too generous. I said my husband had turned our bathroom into a leadership training centre. I said the mirror had heard more strategy than Northbridge ever would. Vera laughed. Then Evan laughed. Then 2 other people laughed because laughter spreads faster than judgment when the target is polite. Tomas lowered his eyes to his plate. I kept going because the first cut had landed and I wanted the room back. I said he had asked whether the navy tie made him look decisive. I said the tie was doing more work than some men did in entire careers. I said Northbridge might hire the tie and let Tomas carry the briefcase. Daniel's fork touched his plate with a small, hard sound. Alina said my name under her breath. Not loud. A warning, maybe. I heard jealousy. I heard people trying to take my stage away from me. Evan added that executive presence could not be bought with silk. He said it as if he were helping the joke, but he watched me after, checking whether I liked it. I did. Then I did not. Then I decided I did. Tomas reached for his water and knocked a drop of sauce onto the end of the navy tie. It was tiny, barely there. He looked at it, took the tie off, and folded it slowly beside his plate. The room changed during that small action. No speech, no anger. Just fabric folded into a square placed near the bread plate like something finished. I should have stopped. The correct thing would have been to touch his arm and let the dinner move on. Instead, I said he should not forget where he came from if the legal people clapped for him. I said some men got one title near their name and started acting like history had been erased. Nobody laughed that time. Not properly. Vera lifted her glass and put it down without drinking. Alina stared at the table. Daniel looked at me with the kind of patience that felt worse than anger. I told myself they were too tense. People were always too tense when truth stopped wearing perfume. After dinner, the hallway outside the private room smelled like lemon cleaner. Thomas stood near the coat hooks with the tie in his hand. Daniel had gone to get the car, but I could see him through the glass doors, standing by the parking lot with his phone out. My husband asked why I needed witnesses. That was all. He did not ask why I was cruel. He did not call me cruel. He asked why I needed witnesses. It was quiet enough that I had to answer the actual question or run from it. I said he was being dramatic. I said everyone joked. I said if a man wanted a CEO role, he should survive a dinner table. What he meant was that the wound was not the joke. The wound was the audience. What I heard was that he wanted me to admit I had done something ugly in front of people who knew us. I told him he was embarrassed because some of it was true. He looked at the tie in his hand. Then he folded it once more, even though it was already folded. That small extra fold made Vera go quiet beside me. She had come up behind us with her coat. Usually she would have rescued me with a joke. Usually she would have said men never understood tone. She did not. She told me the car was ready and then walked ahead. I counted 3 silences on the way out. Vera's, Alina's, Thomas's. Mine was not silence, mine was control. In the parking lot, Daniel stood under a yellow light with his phone in his hand. He was not filming. He was typing. Date, maybe. Place, maybe. Words, maybe. I did not know then, but his face had the look of someone putting things where they could be found later. I told myself accountants made notes because they were boring. That was easier than asking why my brother-in-law needed records after a birthday dinner. At home, Thomas put the navy tie on the dresser instead of back in the closet. He did not throw it. He did not sigh. He placed it down flat. I hated that too. Anger would have let me become the injured one. He asked whether I wanted him to fail. I said I wanted him realistic. He asked whether realistic meant beneath me. That sentence stayed in the room longer than both of us. It touched the door. It touched the dresser. It touched the folded tie. I told myself he was using therapy language without having the courage for therapy. I said I would not be punished for refusing to worship one interview. He nodded once. Then he took his phone from his pocket, looked at the screen, and turned it face down beside the tie. The action was too small to fear. That was what I thought. The next day, Alina did not answer my first call. Vera replied to my messages with fewer words. Evan sent a laughing emoji to one joke but did not add anything that could be read twice. The room from the dinner had followed us home. It was in the pauses. It was in the way Thomas moved around me without touching the air I occupied. I told myself my husband would come back to the old shape once the interview passed. He always did. He made tea. He fixed shelves. He apologized first when both of us were tired. But that night, when he passed the dresser, he picked up the navy tie and carried it into the bathroom. The door closed softly behind him. The bathroom light cut a thin line under the door at 1:06 a.m. I know the time because I checked my phone before I got out of bed. 1 hour, 6 minutes. Another night where my husband's ambition had taken space from my sleep. The apartment was quiet except for the pipes clicking in the wall. I walked barefoot down the hall and stopped outside the bathroom. Thomas was speaking in a low voice. He was practicing answers. Not loud, not theatrical. He sounded like a man building a bridge one plank at a time. He said Northbridge needed trust inside its operations before it could ask clients for trust. He said legal services were not only documents and deadlines. He said people came to companies like that when something in their life was already unstable. He wore the navy tie with a white shirt and pajama pants. That should have made him funny. It did not. In the mirror, his hands shook once, then he pressed them flat on the sink. He started again. Same answer, slower, better. The door inside me opened a little. Not guilt. I did not have a word for guilt that night. It was more practical than that, which made it harder to dismiss. I saw a man trying to become someone he could respect when nobody was clapping. I saw the tie I had bought him because I once wanted people to listen to him. I saw that he was not climbing over me. He was trying to stand without asking my permission. For a few seconds there was no audience and no joke. Just Thomas, the mirror, and the careful way hope looked on a tired face. Then my mother's voice came back from years ago, sharp as a kitchen knife. She used to say men became different once the world applauded them. She used to say a woman should never help build the platform she would later be pushed from. I stepped back from the bathroom door. I told myself the mirror was a trick. Men always made ambition look innocent before it became judgment. Tomas was not preparing to leave me today. Maybe not tomorrow. But a title could give him language for what he had only been thinking. So I closed the door inside myself. In the morning, Alina called while I was making coffee. She said she had been thinking about the birthday dinner. She said it had not sounded like teasing. She said Tomas had looked like someone trying not to disappear in front of us. I told her she was making a marriage into a charity project. I said Tomas was not fragile. I said everyone wanted me to become smaller so he could feel large. Alina went quiet. That silence was different from her usual softness. It had a spine. She said she loved me, but she did not like how practiced my insults had started to sound. I laughed because I needed the sound. I told her she was being dramatic. I told myself younger sisters always mistook boundaries for cruelty when they were not the ones managing a man's pride. After the call, I found Tomas in the kitchen with his folder open. He had written notes by hand. I saw headings. Growth strategy, client trust, internal process, staff retention. He covered the page when I came close. My husband had never covered pages from me before. I asked if we were hiding work notes now. He said he was keeping some things clean until the interview. He did not say safe. He said clean. That word annoyed me because it suggested I was something that made things dirty. I told him I wanted to help. That was my micro shift. Controlled partial truth. I could still win if I changed shape. I said I was sorry if the dinner had sounded harsher than I meant. I said pressure made me blunt. I said I could review his answers because I knew executive language better than anyone in this apartment. Thomas looked tired, not softened. He said he did not want me to polish him if polishing meant sanding him down first. I said that was unfair. He said unfair was one dinner. This was a pattern. Then he named it. Not loudly. He said the wine bar, the birthday dinner, the jokes about his clothes, the way I spoke faster when people looked impressed by him, the way every step forward became proof that he needed correction. Each item was small enough to argue alone. Together they became a wall. I told myself he had prepared that speech to make me look like a defendant. I said he was collecting grievances because the interview had made him self-important. He did not answer right away. He reached for his phone, opened a folder, and then stopped. I saw my name on the screen. I saw message threads. I saw dates. He turned the phone face down beside the navy tie. That was the silent marker. Of course I did not call it that then. I told myself he was being theatrical with office supplies and fabric, but the room understood before I did. Later, Daniel called Thomas. I only heard Thomas's side because he walked into the hallway. He said he was fine. He said no, not tonight. He said he had it handled. Handled. That word stayed under my skin. Vera answered my messages slower that afternoon. 1 sentence, then 4 hours. Then a thumbs up. I sent her a joke about Tomas becoming a courtroom statue if Northbridge hired him. She sent no laugh. Evan replied with caution dressed as charm. He said big interviews made men unbearable, but audio and texts were dangerous when people got emotional. He had never warned me like that before. Evan liked heat until heat had a name attached. That night, Tomas sat beside me on the sofa. He did not touch me. The cushion between us looked planned. He said he wanted me beside him, not above or below him. It was a clean offer. A simple one. Maybe the last simple one. What he meant was that equality was still available. What I heard was a man rehearsing the speech he would give after he had enough power to leave. I said I had been beside him for years while he stood still. I said now he had one interview and wanted to rewrite the whole marriage around his potential. He closed his eyes for 2 seconds. 2. Then he said he hoped I would not do something we could not pretend away. I told myself that was a threat. It was not. It was a door still open. At 11:48 p.m., I sat on the living room sofa with my phone in my hand. The apartment smelled like cold coffee. Thomas had gone to bed, or pretended to. I opened the voice recorder in our message thread. One message, I thought. One message to steady him. I pressed record. The first voicemail was 17 seconds long. I know because I played it back before sending it, not because I was out of control, but because I wanted the tone right. Calm, firm, wife as mirror. I told myself my husband needed to hear the truth before strangers put a title in front of him and made him dangerous. In the message, I said he was chasing a role that did not fit him. I said Northbridge wanted a leader, not a man still waiting for his wife to tell him which shirt made him look serious. I said I was saying it because nobody else would. Then I sent it. The apartment stayed quiet. That should have been enough if truth had been the point. But truth was not the point. Control was. The second message was shorter. The third was sharper. By the 7th, I was in the kitchen, standing under the cold light with one hand on the counter. I said Northbridge would smell failure on him if he walked in pretending. I said legal people were trained to read weakness. I said the room would know. I counted them as I sent them. 7, 8, 9. Thomas did not answer. Silence from my husband usually meant I had room to keep speaking. That was how we had trained each other. He withdrew and I filled the space until the story sounded like mine. At 12 messages, I opened Vera's chat and typed that he was ignoring me before the biggest interview of his life. Like that proved maturity. I waited. No answer. At 18, I stood in the hallway outside our bedroom and kept my voice low. I told him he was nobody without me making him presentable. I said he had no idea how rooms worked. I said he thought preparation was the same as authority. My phone buzzed after 21. Thomas sent one message. He asked me to stop before I created something neither of us could pretend away. Clean. Final. Almost kind. That should have embarrassed me. Instead, it made me angry because he sounded steady without me. I recorded again. By 26, I was looking at the navy tie hanging over the back of a chair. He must have left it there before bed. The silk looked darker in the kitchen light, almost black. I said his place was closer to the street than any boardroom. I said the world had men like him carrying bags for men like Evan. I said a title would not change the shape of him. My voice did not shake. That matters. I was not drunk. I was not crying. I was not lost inside an accident. I chose the words. I checked some of them. I sent them anyway. At 31, I sent Vera a screenshot of the message count. I wanted her to laugh. I wanted her to say men needed hard truths. I wanted the old Vera, the one who clapped when I cut cleanly. The typing dots appeared. They vanished. Nothing came. 2 minutes. 5. 11. That was all her absence looked like. Evan answered one message at 2:09 a.m. He said I should avoid putting things in writing or audio when emotions ran high. I read it and smiled without warmth. Even then, he was stepping sideways. At 36, Tomas walked into the kitchen. He was wearing sweatpants and a plain shirt. His hair was flattened on one side from trying to sleep. He looked less like a CEO than he had at the mirror. That should have satisfied me. It did not. He asked softly if I understood what I was doing. I told him I understood better than he did. I said I had carried visible ambition for years while he hid behind being useful. I said he let me become the impressive one, the hard one, the one people watched, and now he wanted applause because he had finally decided to move. There it was, the one true thing. He did not argue. He could not. Thomas had loved through errands and repairs and quiet support. He had let me stand in front of us because it was easier than asking for space beside me. He had made me powerful and lonely at the same time. For one breath, the truth sat between us without defense. Then I used it like a weapon. I told him he did not get to become brave only when a company needed a face. I told him Northbridge was not seeing him. They were seeing a late version of a man I had dragged through life. He looked at me for a long time. He said he was going to handle things properly. No legal words, no threats. No raised voice. That was what made it colder. What he meant was that words had stopped working. What I heard was arrogance, new title arrogance before he even had the title. I recorded 4 more messages after he went back to the bedroom, 40 in total. At 5:13 a.m., I stopped because my throat was dry and the apartment looked pale around the windows. I slept for 40 minutes on the sofa with my phone in my hand. Thomas left without waking me. The Northbridge conference room had a long glass table and a speaker system built into the centre. I know this because Tomas told me later. In the flat way people describe places where something private became public. Mara Chen sat at one end with 2 other partners. There were folders, water glasses, and a small black conference speaker with a blue light. Thomas placed his phone near his notes because one of the interview files was stored there. He was exhausted. He had every right to look damaged. He did not. He answered the first question about operational risk. He answered the second about rebuilding client trust after rapid growth. Mara asked about pressure. He said pressure revealed systems that were already weak. Then the speaker connected to the wrong audio source. My voice entered the room. Not all 40 messages, not even one full minute, just enough. I said he was nobody. I said the street was the only place that fit him. I said Northbridge would see through him if they had any sense. There are humiliations you can laugh through because people are unsure what they heard. This was not that. My voice was clear. My pace was calm. There was no way to make it sound like a joke. Thomas reached for the phone and turned it off. He apologized for the interruption. He did not explain first. He did not blame a technical issue. He did not perform injury for them. Mara asked whether he wanted a break. He said he had worked under pressure before and could continue. That sentence did what my messages failed to do. It made him larger. He finished the interview. He gave them the strategy he had practiced in the bathroom mirror. He talked about trust, process, and how people needed steadiness most when the room became unstable. My voice had followed him there to destroy him. Instead, it explained him. That evening, he came home at 7:22 p.m. I was at the kitchen counter, dressed like I had been busy all day. I had not been busy. I had watched his locations stop at Northbridge, then a parking garage, then a cafe, then home. He placed his keys in the bowl. I asked how badly it went. Thomas looked at me. Not like my husband, like Thomas. He said they offered him the position. One sentence. No smile. I laughed because a laugh was available before anything else. I said they must have been desperate. I said maybe legal companies liked wounded men because they looked serious. He did not answer. He walked into the bedroom and took the navy tie from the chair. For a second, I thought he would put it away. Instead, he folded it and placed it inside his briefcase. I told myself the silence was punishment. I told myself he would come back from it once the title became ordinary. But he slept in the guest room that night, and when I knocked once, he did not tell me to come in. The celebration dinner was 1 week later, in the same restaurant private room where I had made the tie into a joke. I arrived late because late still looked like control if you walked in correctly. The lamps were low again. The green walls were the same. The table had fewer people than I expected. Vera's chair was empty. Thomas sat near Mara Chen. Daniel sat by the door and did not drink. My husband wore a better suit, but not the navy tie. I counted the people who did not look relieved to see me. 5. I told myself a title did not change a marriage unless I allowed it to. So when someone congratulated Thomas again, I smiled and said he should remember who had kept him realistic before Northbridge polished him. The room did not laugh. Thomas placed his napkin beside his plate and stood up. He left the table before anyone else moved. That was his exit. First him, then the rest of it. A woman in a grey coat entered and asked for me by my full name. Elise Brand. Neutral voice. Professional face. She handed me an envelope and asked me to confirm receipt. My fingers left a damp mark on the paper when I signed. Inside were a petition for dissolution of marriage, a motion for temporary orders, and a notice of first status conference. The temporary orders hearing was scheduled for the following month. The motion requested temporary use of the apartment, preservation of joint funds, and controlled communication through counsel. Daniel looked down at his glass. Mara looked at the envelope, then at me, and her face did not move. The proof was not mysterious. The birthday dinner notes, the 40 voicemails, the screenshot I had sent Vera, the voicemail that played in the Northbridge conference room. I said couples said ugly things under stress. Mara said Northbridge valued judgment under pressure. She did not raise her voice. She did not accuse me. That was why I had nothing to push against. Evan texted before dessert came. He said he never told me to send anything and asked not to be mentioned. Then he removed himself from the next 3 shared invitations. Thomas moved into a furnished apartment near Northbridge, and I kept walking past the empty side of the closet where his suits had been. Our joint accounts were restricted until the temporary orders hearing, and I had to ask my lawyer before moving money I used to treat like air. Alina stopped answering late calls, Daniel blocked me, and Vera became read receipts without a body. Evan told friends he thought I had been joking and deleted the group chat. At work, one executive branding client left after Mara's circle heard that my private judgment did not match the image I sold. I told myself my voice was the last place where I could keep him beneath me. 40 messages. One speaker. One room that heard the part of me I had been calling honesty. I used to think power meant making sure my husband never became taller than my fear. It only taught him how to leave without asking me to understand. The navy tie is not in the closet anymore. I kept the man small until the space he left became bigger than me.